I want to talk about two subjects. I want to start with yards and then go over to the US role. But just looking at the yards, because if someone isn't in the shipping industry, it seems strange that basically three countries run the whole show creating new ships. And that has massive consequences. What's the sort of the short story on how we ended up only seeing China, Korea, and Japan building these vessels?
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. So, you're talking about 93% of all the world shipping built in those three countries. The Philippines builds 1%, and then the rest of the world divvy up the rest of the 6% with no country building more than 1%. So, it's consolidation, and it's something we've seen throughout the shipping industry in almost all sectors. You've seen it happen in containers, you've seen it happen in the passenger liners, you've seen it happen in ports, and you've seen it happen in shipbuilding. And, one of the reasons is economy of scale. It's just more efficient and effective to build more ships. In the United States, there's a lot of criticism because you can build a container ship over at this port. And if you build one in the United States, it's more expensive and it's much smaller. And, one of the reasons that is, in the US, we just built like 2 container ships recently, and they're really expensive. But it goes to the idea of buying a car. If I want to go buy a Ford F-150, if I buy it from the dealership, it's going to cost me X amount of money. If I'm going to build a Ford F-150 myself and manufacture the parts, it's going to cost me a lot more. And what you want is ships coming off an assembly line. They're cheaper. The economy of scale. When you're building 8 ships, that is much more efficient than building 1 or 2. If you build 1 ship, it's a work of art. It's really unique. What Japan, Korea, and China have done is really embrace the policies that were used. I go back to that World War II analogy of prefabrication, mass production. Let's go ahead and pump ships off almost like Lego blocks and build them in pieces, modularization. Build, what the shipyards become are assembly areas. You're just putting the pieces together. You're not fabricating too much. And Japan, Korea, and China embrace that. And more importantly, their government supported it. There was a lot of investor in that in terms of either subsidies or benefits for the shipyards. And, there's very innovative ways of ownership. Japan, for example, has a very unique ownership program where they'll build ships, but they may own 2 of them and lease them to a company so they get some money from them. Korea and China, China for a long time, you built a ship in China in the 1990s and it would be, you would have a lot of issues with it. But by the 2000s, they were better. And by the 2010s, they're top of the line. They are the model you want. And more importantly, too, they're designing ships for service lives of 15 to 20 years. They're designed to be recycled. They're designed so that the technology can be just rolled around, as opposed to ships maybe built in the US and Europe in the 70s and 80s, which much thicker hulls, designed for longer service lives. And so there's a big mentality about it. And I think those countries in particularly have embraced the idea that this is a key component for them. One of the other things too is if you look at those 3 countries, Japan, Korea, and China, they're building ships, commercial ships right alongside Navy ships. So they have large navies, and they're going out and getting other companies to come in and build them. Denmark, classic example, Maersk built all their ships at Odense in Denmark for years and years and years. But then Daewoo and Hyundai in Korea made them an offer. It's like, we can build them cheaper. We can cut your costs and build you good ships at a much lower price. And what we saw was a lot of that happening. We're seeing it right now in China with the building of passenger liners. Shipyards like Fincantieri, STX, they got to be worried that that's going to go overseas because, one of the things we saw was shipyards. Okay, we're not going to build all ships. We're going to specialize in certain areas. We're going to build cruise ships. Well, if China starts doing that, or if LNG carriers are being built in Korea, then they're going to be able to get that aspect of the market. And obviously, it's a big issue because the concern that can be raised is maybe not a general, one of the fears is a war between China and the United States. But my concern is more of a war in East Asia, is those countries do not like each other typically. There's a long history between all of them. And, if you get a Korea-China war, a Japan-China war, or something like that, that could disrupt global ship construction. And we've seen it in the past where certain nations control large sectors of the economy. The British did it for a long time. They monopolized ocean shipping for a long time, and now we see it's East Asia that's really in the driver's seat.
If you had to create a new shipyard nation, which country would you bet on, and how would you do it? Because I guess it's very much related to the government, of course, but is the US the only potential country who could come up to that scale, or could you figure out something in Brazil, Europe, Portugal? Because this has to be sort of like, you need to have a great policy, right? Because sometimes it's not going to be, is it about profitability or security? Because if you do this operation, you also get, competence in a very important industry, which can get relevant in uncertain and unstable times.
Yeah, no, I think a country like Brazil or in the Caribbean somewhere, you can develop that. I think it's really hard to do for example, in the United States for a couple of reasons, not the least of which is, okay, you need to get land close to water. And that's a tough one, because where are you going to build this shipyard? Because you got to build it close to a population center because you need workers. And and the other problem you have is it's a huge investment upfront with very little return until much later. And you have to have enough shipbuilding down the lane to do it. And that's always been the problem in investment in shipping, whether it's a shipyard or a ship company. Buy a ship. Okay, I'm going to buy a ship. Well, you can build a new one. That's 2-3 years till you start making money. And even then you got to be guaranteed cargo and routes. And so, I think areas like Africa and South America are an interesting one for the creation of it. But plus, where are the resources? Where's the machinery? Again, today, one of the things that we're seeing is how much shipyards today are assembly areas. They're not really building a ship. They're not doing the steel. They're not building the engines there. Everything's being freighted in or shipped in and then assembled. And so, you have to be on good routes. You got to be very advantageous to be able to get in there. And you got to have a good workforce, a workforce that can be trained and skilled. I'm always interested when you go to the different yards in Japan, for example, the Japanese shipyards to me are master craftsmen. They know every aspect of it. Go to a Korean shipyard, the person working in the Korean shipyard knows what they're doing. That's it. They don't know anything else about the rest of the thing. They're trained on one thing and they're going to do the one thing and do it well. And, that's an interesting, what's your philosophy on how you want to do it? Obviously, wage is a problem because you have to pay for skilled, welding and fine machinery. And as ships become more complicated, you need that more tech involved in it. So, I think the opening up in areas like Brazil, for example, is always an interesting one because I think they have the resources. I think that there's a growing need for it. If you look at the amount of shipping that comes out of South America right now, there are potential areas for it. The problem you have is how much money China keeps tossing at this issue. And there was just a story out about Germany sitting there saying, listen, we need to get shipbuilding back. However, it's almost impossible to compete against China for the following reasons. They're not making profits. It's state-owned. There's huge subsidies involved. There was a report that came out a few years ago that, from 2010 to 2018, the Chinese threw $132 billion into shipbuilding, into just subsidies and just subsidizing their shipbuilding industry because they want to corner the market in certain areas, which they have. I mean, there's no denying the fact that that's what they've done. And we've seen it happen in the shipping industry before. And the one big variable I'll tell you is this, Christopher, is technology right now. That's the big variable. If with fuel and engines, because of the push by IMO to go 50% decarbonization by 2050, which I think is going to change. They're going to go further. Whoever comes up with the new technology, whoever gets their handle on that, whoever has the access to the fuel, that's going to be the technology game changer. That's going to be akin to containerization, the shift from sail to steam in the future. Because everybody's looking for what that technology is. Is it hybrid? Is it hydrogen? Is it fusion power? I don't know. But whoever comes up with it, they're going to be in a big advantage. And if they can capitalize on it, they can shift the entire industry.